strength, courage, dignity, honor, wisdom. When we look veterans in the eye and say, thank you for your service, this is the archetype that most of us are visualizing as we express our words of gratitude. For many people, these traits are what the American flag represents, the best of what we Americans aspire to be as individual human beings and as a nation. And there is great honor in representing our flag in that capacity. And as we've also been told through the words of our own veterans in our congregation, people like Phil Ellsworth and Richard Highland in their own powerful sermons throughout the years, oftentimes wars become romanticized, while the lived experience of serving is far from the idealized archetype of what I just described. And so, what do we do when the ideal potential lived expression meets that alternative reality that counters the above named qualities? What do we do with the reality of the violence and the harm and the trauma done by war? Do we simply become disillusioned and take down our American flag? Do we do what we've done in the past during Vietnam and look at returning veterans and say, you guys are a sham and a joke, and spit on them, creating in them even more trauma and moral injury than they were already returning home with? Do we stick our heads in the mud and continue to wave the flag in blind oblivion to how our flag is received to many people across the world? What do we do with the fact that our lived experience is never, ever in reality the idealized version we play in our heads? How do we weave the ideal version of what we'd like it to be with the lived experience of what it really is? How do we weave that together into a comprehensive, dignified whole? I invite us to sit with this tension today, because I want to look our veterans in the eye and say thank you. And we see you. And we see the whole of you. The dignity, the honor, the strength, the courage, and the wounds, the fears, the traumas, and the physical, psychological, and moral injuries that also accompany service in our armed forces. Sometimes when we look at the big picture and we begin to notice things that are not working as a system, we lose the capacity to acknowledge the real live human beings within the system. The individual men and women who are still sacrificing their lives, their health, their limbs in our name. And when we lose the capacity to recognize them, we lose a little bit of ourselves. And so we live in a day and age where we as a country are working to reconcile the two archetypes. We're trying to reconcile the dignity of the veteran with the cruelty of the system. And occasionally, the two blend into one another and we're not able to distinguish between them. And that is when the real harm is done. And that is when moral injury occurs. And as we mature as a nation, I believe that we are being called to see, acknowledge, and embrace all of it without needing to romanticize it to the point of being unrealistic or to demonize it beyond recognition. And so, as we honor our veterans on this Veterans Day weekend, I invite us to recognize and lift up the whole human being. The dignity, the grace, the strength, the wisdom, and the wounds, the scars, the pain, the injury, the brokenness that some of them return with. Until we embrace it all, we will be a shallow and hollow depiction of what we as a society can truly be. I told this story last year, but I'm gonna tell it again. Of one of I helped to train professional chaplains, and one of my chaplain interns a few years ago was a man who was putting himself through school and supporting his family by working as a CNA in a nursing home in Glenwood Springs. And one of the most powerful pastoral conversations he had was with an old World War II veteran who just wanted a glass of milk at 3 a.m. The old man couldn't sleep, and Ephraim in his kindness wheeled him down to the kitchen and sat with him while he drank his milk. And as they were just sitting together in a comfortable silence, the story poured out of him. And his story that he had been keeping inside for decades, for so many decades of his life, came out not to a therapist, not to a minister, but to a CNA who simply showed compassion, poured him a glass of milk, and quietly held space at 3 a.m. for a buried story to surface. A story that had never been shared even to beloved family members. And I believe that healing occurred that night for the simple reason that one human being held space for another human being to tell his story. Every veteran has their own experience while serving, while returning, the life they've lived before they served and the life they lived and live after their service. And for some, the time in the service colored everything that they've done afterwards, who they were afterwards. For others, it was simply a time in their life, an experience. They returned home and they moved on. Because every veteran is different, every story is different, every experience is different. And so I often think about Phil's poem. How many times in life have we been extended grace and we don't even realize it? How many times in life has the kindness or a decision that somebody's making from their higher self how many times does that impact a complete stranger or has changed our own lives in a fundamental way and we never knew it? How many times perhaps has a random act of kindness of our own impacted or changed somebody else's life in a way that they will never know? So there are wonderful stories and happy endings, and you can go and you can watch movies with wonderful happy endings. But within those happy endings are also larger realities. And that's what my friend's text reminded and reminds us of this morning. That there are wonderful, beautiful, happy children today in the United States who have a future. And their extended family in Afghanistan probably doesn't. So as we take the time to just sit with this today, it's a time to acknowledge that many of our veterans know these realities of war better than the rest of us, certainly better than I do. For me, it's theoretical in my lived experience. And they bring these truths home with them in their hearts. And there are so many stories they don't always express to their loved ones when they come home, because some of what they've seen or experienced or done, how do you express or share something like that? How can you express the knowledge that you may have caused harm? And so over the years, I've had people tell me, I don't want to be thanked for my service because I don't deserve it. What I did wasn't honorable or noble. So please, please don't thank me for that. People come back changed. They return with moral injury and soul wounds, having done things they didn't know themselves capable of doing. Some of them heroic, others not so much, or the complete opposite. And sometimes it's both and. That you might have done something heroic and you look back and there are things you wish you wouldn't have been asked to do. And so we have to acknowledge that. When I meet somebody in the military, I often say thank you for your service because that's how we express it. But I do that knowing and understanding that there are stories they don't want to share. So when I say thank you for your service, I am saying we see you. We see you anyways. We acknowledge you and we thank you anyway. It doesn't make everything okay, but they represent us. If we don't like how the military is representing us, it's on us as citizens to do better. It's on us as citizens to choose better leadership. It's on us to know what's going on. Phil, in his sermon a few years ago about this, also told us the story about near the end of the war, when his platoon was they were walking by, and they didn't realize that there was a platoon of German soldiers right above them. Basically, they were walking into an ambush. And Phil realized later that the commander of that German platoon told his people to hold their fire. And he let the Americans walk on by because I don't know why. Phil doesn't know why. But he shared that he and his buddies were alive because of a decision from that other human being, that other soldier deciding that he was going to recognize the humanity in the people he didn't know, the humanity in his potential enemies, and let them walk away. It's these types of stories that we need to share with each other, that we need to keep alive in our hearts and in our minds, because we don't want to just romanticize what it means to be in the military, but we also don't want to demonize it either. And so I invite us just to sit with this for a moment as we think about who we are as Americans, as we think about who we are as citizens, who we are as individuals, what role in the collective humanity of America and in the world do we individually play, and what have we played? And I came across this poem on Facebook a few years ago, and I think really it was written during many of the protests and the marches in I think was it the summer of 2016 or 2017, when we were having all of the Black Lives Matter marches and the frustration. And so once again, I've shared this a few times, but I'm going to share it again. And I want us to think about, do we stand or do we kneel? Or do we do a little bit of both? And this came across Facebook. It was written by a person named Andrew Freeborg. I stand to honor the promise the flag represents. You kneel because that promise has been broken. I stand to affirm my belief that all are created equal and to fight alongside you for that promise. You kneel because too few stand with you. I stand because we can do better. You kneel to remind us to be better. I stand to honor all that have fought and died so that we may be free. You kneel because not all of us are. I stand because I can. You kneel for those who can't. I stand to defend your right to kneel. You kneel to defend my right to stand. I stand because I love this country. You kneel because you love it too. And so now what I would like us to do on this Veterans Day weekend is just take a moment for us to honor the current and past veterans of our nation's uniformed services, to thank their families for their service. We express our enduring gratitude, both in words and actions, to all who served, whatever role they play, whatever their service was, wherever their service took them. We say thank you to those whose service was brief and to those who made a career of their service. We say thank you to those who remember their service with fondness and to those whose time in service still haunts them. We say thank you to those who returned to us largely intact, who found jobs, started families, and who continue to find ways to serve their communities. We say thank you to those who returned with brokenness so deep that they continue to struggle to find a role or even a home in our communities. It is quite easy to say that those who died in our wars gave their lives so that the rest of us could enjoy our freedom. It is harder to honor those who died and those who served by resisting the erosion of freedom and by working to prevent war. We say thank you to the peacemakers. So now I just invite us to reflect as I name the national service with which people may identify. We honor those who served in World War II. We honor those who served in the Korean War. We honor those who served during the Vietnam War. We honor those who served during the First Gulf War. We honor those who served during the war in Vietnam and Iraq. We honor those who served in the uniformed services during peacetime. We honor all those who currently serve in the uniformed military services, active duty or reserve duty. We honor family members of anyone currently serving in the uniformed military. We honor family members of anyone who served in the uniformed military services, active duty or reserve duty. And we also honor and call out those who have a friend or a neighbor or a loved one who has served in the military. We honor it all, the families, the friends, the neighbors, the individuals, the communities. We honor the sacrifices that are made in service to our country, and we recognize that we are all of it. Today, I would like to name some of our own veterans who are here today. Lynn, I don't see, but Lynn is one of our veterans. Floyd, Laird, Joe, Doug, Bruce, Richard, Dan, Mick, Lance. And if there are any members that are here joining us from Zoom, please let me know. I invite us to just take a moment of silence, of gratitude, of thanks for all that is our lives. And let us close this morning with a song of hope for what we can at our best be. We'll build a land.